about these things.
So there's the FAI.
It's the FAI,
Yes,
all.
and all the standards were international.
It's having these French measures thrust down our throat, which is so tiresome. We adopt them with certain things. It seems very reasonable. For example, if you build a swallow from a kit, you build it in millimetres. Sling did all his measurements in kilometres. You may think that you've got ribs which are a foot apart, but it's all in millimetres. And that's very sensible, because a millimetre is just the right accuracy you need for building a wooden aircraft. You needn't bother with anything smaller than that. So millimetres do have their uses. Most of the time, the metric system doesn't actually correspond to any sort of natural way of doing things, but for building swallows, they were very good. Of course, we did a lot of the building at the weekend, because John Griffiths was an apprentice in Bedford. And at the weekend, Slingsby's works were shut, so we couldn't get advice. So he was doing up Sling himself at home. And one day we had got to the stage of having to fix rib 1 to the main spar, which is a fundamental thing to do, the big fat root rib to the main spar. And we did it according to, well, we didn't do it, we jigged it up according to the drawings. We said, it can't possibly be like that. I mean, that looks absurd. So eventually we rang up Sling. He's very relaxed about it. He said, oh yes, we often get things wrong in the factory. Yes, well I should just, why don't you just sort of stick it on so that it's sort of more or less at right angles. Next, you know, the bits of wood on the rib itself, make sure they're parallel to the spar and you'll be all right. When Sling came down the day before the first flight of Penguin, I had him sign the line on rib 1, which the factory had put there wrongly. F.N. Slingsby, it was signed.
All done? Well, I'll both say thank you very much.
That was fun. Thanks for asking me.
And we do all know, don't we, that this is the armchair pilot.
Oh, that came later, you see.
I believe you.
Yeah, that came when I went to Italy and I wasn't flying gliders, and I started thinking about these things.
So that, so you wrote under that.
That's when I started writing. I had written for S&G before, but the original armchair pilot articles were from my time in Italy.
Right. And I've read your paper, The Theory of Cross-Country Flying, and that came before the Macready ring, is that right?
Before?
Macready and his ring, use of the ring.
Well, yes, you see, everybody talks about the Macready value. The great thing about Paul Macready's ring was that it actually solved the differential equation that needs to be solved in order to find out how fast to fly to the next thermal. But the two people who did the mathematics for the Macready ring were two people from Cambridge. One was Gordon Pirrie, who was a member of the club, and one was Edwin, can't get the second name for a moment, who was an undergraduate in Emmanuel, but who actually flew from Dunstable. But these were two Cambridge students, and they took the previous best speed to fly theory and worked out how to apply it to the sync between thermals, because previously people judged how fast you should fly through the sync depending upon the strength of the thermal for that day. But they didn't know how to compensate for the fact that you were also in sinking air between the thermals. And they produced a differential equation, which Paul Macready's ring solves by analog method. Right. So everybody tends to think of it as Macready's development. But no, it wasn't. It was done by two Cambridge people in 1947. I think neither of them knew that the other was doing it, and they both appear in the same number of self-headed writing. So the evidence is there for everybody to see.
Wow.
The contribution that I made was to point out that you can take the mathematical theory further, and that what you've got to do with the Macready ring is to set it at the value that you think is appropriate for the day, which may not be the value which you would get from the basic theory of rate of time on sync between terminals, you must set it at the value you think you can get away with as high as possible. What I call the threshold value, because what the mathematics proves is that if you set a threshold value, then provided you always circle if the lift is higher than that value, and always fly straight if it's lower than that value, you can't do better.
Right.
But of course, a wise glider pilot, when he sees the ground approaching, cranks down the McCready value. But basically, it's my threshold value you've got to look at. If you find yourself going straight and level through lift which is greater than your current McCready setting, you must either stop and circle, or you must change the setting.
Right.
Until you get to the point where you are prepared to go through lift that's that strong. And that's what the theory says. It's very simple. And I think it's all programmed into the electronics now these days.
Indeed.
Well, that's my threshold theorem.
Excellent.
I never dared use it myself because I was always much more keen on staying up.
Exactly, such a good answer. I think that's the quote of the day. Well, thank you ever so much. Thank you for coming. We've got one more lecture in the series, which is on the 30th of May, and it's about the pilot of the SR-71.
Slightly faster than Swallow.
Flies at Mach 3. Rich Graham. See you all then.
Thank you very much.
Very good.